Hi, I'm Dr. Gerard Guillory with the CARE Group in Denver, Colorado. We have a functional medicine practice. We really try and find what's at the root cause of your symptoms. Come on in and let's talk about that. Today we're going to be talking about one of my special areas of interest, and that is food allergies and food sensitivities. The real question is, could your food be making you sick? And the answer is absolutely. And when you look at food allergies and food sensitivities, there are a lot of different mechanisms that can underlie how you might react to a food. As one example, you may have heard of lactose intolerance. Lactose intolerance is an enzyme deficiency. You don't have enough of the enzyme lactase, and consequently you can't break down the lactose in dairy products. It goes undigested into the colon, and you end up with gas and bloating and diarrhea. You can have other food reactions. For example, you might react to caffeine, and caffeine can relax the lower esophageal sphincter, which is the one-way valve between the esophagus and the stomach, and that can predispose you to, for example, heartburn. One of my other areas of interest is Msg sensitivity. We see patients every day with things like migraine headaches, for example, that are actually reacting to the flavor enhancer Msg. If you look at any textbook on migraine headaches, it will say dietary triggers, monosodium glutamate, or Msg. The problem is many people don't realize that it goes by a lot of different names, and it's in a lot of different prepackaged and processed foods. It's not just in Chinese food. For example, monosodium glutamate also goes by names such as hydrolyzed vegetable protein, modified food starch, sodium caseinate, and so on. So if you think you might be reacting to Msg, you really need to become aware of some of these other names that it goes by in these other food additives. The list is quite extensive. There are probably at least 50 different food additives that contain Msg. In my experience, the majority of patients I see with migraine headaches are reacting to Msg or a close cousin to Msg, which is aspartame or aspartic acid, as found in many artificial sweeteners. So let me try and explain a little bit more what happens. Glutamic acid is an amino acid. Amino acids serve as building blocks for proteins, and they also serve as neurotransmitters for the brain. In susceptible individuals, the glutamic acid that you ingest will stimulate a receptor in the brain called the NMDA receptor, or the N-methyl D-aspartate receptor, and chronic overstimulation of this receptor can trigger migraine headaches. Aspartic acid, as found in aspartame, triggers the same receptor, and in susceptible individuals can trigger these troublesome headaches. It goes beyond that. Msg and aspartame can cause a lot of other problems: chronic fatigue, dizziness, lightheadedness, and so on. So Msg and aspartame are just two examples of foods that you can react to. You can also react to foods on an immunologic basis, in which case your body actually produces antibodies to various proteins found in foods. You can have reactions to dairy that really isn't on the basis of a lactose intolerance. In fact, it is your body making antibodies to normally innocuous proteins in these various foods. When that occurs and your body's creating antibodies, your immune system is upregulated, and that can cause a whole host of problems in the digestive tract as well as downstream. For example, if you're making antibodies to proteins in dairy products, you can have symptoms like chronic fatigue syndrome. You can have autoimmune disorders, aches and pains, for example. Another common food reaction is a reaction to gluten. Gluten sensitivity was considered to be a very rare disorder when I was in medical school. We were taught that 1 in 3,000 people have gluten sensitivity. It was a disorder that was seen mainly in children. As it turns out now, probably 1 in 100 people have gluten sensitivity. Have you ever wondered why you see so many packages now labeled as being gluten-free? And the reason is that gluten sensitivity is much more common than it was once thought to be. Gluten sensitivity has been associated with various autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. Any patient I see with one of these autoimmune disorders, I will ask them to avoid gluten to see what happens. And more often than not, it can make a huge difference in terms of their symptoms. When your body reacts to gluten at the level of the gut, you end up getting what we call a leaky gut. The small bowel will become damaged, and now these larger bacterial and food particles get into the bloodstream and percolate in the bloodstream, further activating your immune system. And the areas that are most affected are the joints, the kidneys, for example, the skin if you have lupus, and a lot of times the problem really does relate back to the gut and the foods that you're ingesting. So I would really want you to consider the question I posed at the beginning: could your food be making you sick? And understand that there are a lot of different mechanisms that can underlie these different reactions. It could be an enzyme deficiency, as is the case with lactase enzyme deficiency. It can be a direct stimulant effect, as is the case with MSG and aspartame, stimulating a receptor in the brain. Or it could be on an immunological basis, in which case your body is actually making antibodies to these various foods. Fortunately, now we have some very sophisticated tests to try and figure this out. When I first started practice about 25 years ago, we had patients keep diet symptom diaries, and it was very arduous process trying to figure out what someone was reacting to. But fortunately now we have some very good testing to help figure this out. The new sort of cutting edge testing is the immunoglobulin G food allergy testing. Immunoglobulin G antibodies are actually made by specialized white blood cells in the lining of the intestine. And we've had lots of patients with various disorders, from rheumatoid arthritis to psoriasis, etc., who we were able to help by identifying those foods that they were reacting to and eliminating them from the diet. So if you can't get some of this testing, then I would suggest keep a good diet symptom diary and see if you can figure this out. Do a little detective work on your own.